And we are back, another episode of the Post Republic. I am your host Adrian here with Tyler and Silas. How you guys feeling today? Ready to roll?
Finally, we got it working. Had some technical difficulties. I think the AI demons were trying to get us, but
not this time.
Yeah, we figured it out. Trying to change my name.
Can't be both.
There we go.
Yes.
All right. Well, we got news. That's for sure. Let's see. Oh, now I lost my list here.
Well, the big news of the day, obviously, is the tariffs.
Trump tariffs spark global trade tensions. President Donald Trump's new 10% tariff on imports, effective today, has ignited a global trade standoff. The EU is set to impose a 20% tariff on April 9th, and China plans a 34% tariff on U.S. goods starting April 10th. Markets are volatile, with businesses like JLR halting shipments and prices rising in anticipation of further escalation. We also have severe weather and flooding devastate central U.S. A deadly storm system has killed at least 17 people, bringing flash flooding and severe weather to the Midwest and the South. We got nationwide hands-off protests against the Trump administration. Over 1,200 hands-off protesters have erupted nationwide from D.C. to L.A., opposing Trump's policies like tariffs and perceived rights violations. Demonstrators wave Ukrainian flags and wear Palestinian keffiyehs, targeting the administration figures like Elon Musk in a unified show of dissent. Let's see. Breakthrough in Alzheimer's research. Okay. Scientists at the leading U.S. Research Institute have reported a major advance in Alzheimer's treatment, identifying a protein that could halt disease progression. Early trials show promise in reversing memory loss. Or is it just another big old scam by Big Pharma? We'll find that out. Cyber attack targets major U.S. banks. Sophisticated cyber attack hits several major U.S. financial institutions overnight, disrupting online banking services and exposing vulnerabilities in the sector. Authorities suspect a state-sponsored group, and while no funds were reported stolen, the incident has raised urgent concerns about cybersecurity infrastructure, which probably a good thing. Cybersecurity is essentially national security at this point. So lots going on in the post-republic. I think the biggest thing, is obviously Trump's tariffs. Everybody thinks that the world is ending. The markets took a pretty gnarly hit. But I think I heard Trump say that China has 100-year strategy. We can't have a quarterly strategy. We can't just base all of our grand strategy off of what the markets are going to do every 4 months when we have opponents like China that have 100-year grand strategy. So I tend to agree with Trump. You know me, I'm a big old MAGA guy. So I think he's going to come out on top. But there's always going to be some short-term pain. What are you guys hearing?
Yeah, I mean, as the world's biggest importer by far, I think we do hold the cards, because China can put a 35% tariff on our goods, but we don't import that much by comparison. It's not even close. Mm-hmm. So in terms of leverage, Trump has those cards if he wants to get anything in terms of negotiations or other aspects. I mean, there's a lot of debate over what the ultimate goal of the tariffs are. Is it just to get a better trade deal, or is it to replace the income tax, or is it, just leverage for one thing or another? So there's a lot in play. And there's actually a video that Trump shared that I can play real quick. It's a 1-minute summary kind of describing the possible benefits that people aren't initially privy to, that is good to be aware of.
He's seen in over 50 years. Now, here's the secret game he's playing, and it could make you rich. So, why is he doing this? To push cash into treasuries, which forces the Fed to slash interest rates in May, and those lower rates give the Fed the ability to refinance trillions of debt very inexpensively. It also weakens the dollar and drops mortgage rates. Now, it's a wild chess move, but it's working. Now, you're probably wondering, what about his tariffs? Well, I'll tell you, it's a genius play. It actually forces companies to build here to dodge them. It also forces farmers to sell more of their products here in the US to bring grocery prices way down. We've already seen this with eggs. Now, remember, 94% of all stocks are owned only by 8% of Americans. So Trump, he's taking from the rich short term and handing it to the middle class through lower prices.
Yes. Now, whether that's, there's going to be some price increases on some goods that we don't make, electronics or otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that's a trade-off. I mean, Thomas Sowell has said this many times, that there's no perfect solution. There's only trade-offs. So people want to focus on the stock market, which is funny because a lot of the people on the left, they were part of Occupy Wall Street. Now they're all concerned about what the Dow's at because, oh no, my stock portfolio as a broke millennial really matters, right? Really fighting the powers that be by complaining about the stock market. So they're kind of in a contradiction there.
No, you're right.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of long-term gain that will happen from the tariff moves, and it's multiple facets of the approach. It's negotiation for many other things besides the market. So I think it's a wise move overall for United States to kind of take back the leverage that they actually have, and then from there everything will start to even out and on more of a even playing ground in the market.
Well, and that's fair, right? We're all about fairness, and kindness. And I don't think 700% tariffs on American products is fair or kind. And I think the liberals make a big mistake, is they kind of expect everyone to kind of operate from their worldview or their moral perspective of niceness and kindness. The other countries don't care. You're not going to, be super nice to Iran, and then since we're nice to them, they're gonna, stop with their global domination plans. So you can't those smart enemies are going to take care of or take advantage of your weaknesses, right?
Yes.
And they have been for probably more than we realize. I feel like the United States is still a young country learning how to kind of wield its power, and the blessing of being the first true democracy that is trying to keep it alive. But all countries, I think all countries, all the major ones at least, are republics first, and then you have the system underneath that everyone's trying to make work out. But
and then an empire tends to, with a successful republic, it seems like an empire is kind of the next logical, either collapse or empire is the next logical step, it seems.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the big question, I think the big meta question that I would ask is, the US needs to get together and figure out whether or not we want to be an empire or if we want to be a more isolated republic. Because there's arguments on both sides where if we just withdraw all of our, power and influence, and we just kind of build up our borders, we're isolationists, we don't get involved with any other wars, rising powers will have nothing to check them. And I think I'd rather live under a global or a US empire as opposed to say a Chinese or a Russian empire. That does come with a little bit of speculation of being like, well, it's not a for sure thing that China would rise up and become the global power, but I think it's at least erring on the side of caution of thinking they could, and it could, and an argument could be made that it's likely that they would rise up and essentially take over the world if if we're not there, say in a world where we just withdraw, I don't see why China or Russia or Iran or any other nation wouldn't just rise up. I don't really want to live under Sharia law. I'm not sure I want to live under the secular, neo-communist regime of China. Putin, I don't know. I mean, I feel like he's the fairest of the bunch. But what do you guys think? I guess that's a more bigger, broader, more meta ethical question that needs to be answered.
Well, I think we're heading into a multipolar world, and that's been talked about for a long time. I don't think there will be a global hegemon like there was with the United States for so long. And I think what Trump is doing in many of his moves is to shift away from being not explicitly withdrawing totally from all the empire stuff, but shifting more towards we're going to control this hemisphere, this part of the world. We're going to still enact a lot of influence, and he's not fully disengaging from conflicts as we've seen in Yemen, which we can get into later. But I do think that, and I mean, Keir Starmer just said globalization is dead. He's going to give a speech tomorrow, I guess, the Prime Minister of the UK. I think the most likely outcome, especially with Europe and the United States and China and Russia having weapons and having that deterrent, we're not going to see a World War III. It's unlikely, at least. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think the most likely scenario that we're heading towards is more regionalized control. Now, whether or not the United States pulls some kind of card that enacts, a new or some type of financial reset to where we have stronger hand that we can dominate a little bit more than we are now. I mean, I just don't think that's the likely outcome. I think we're just going to have not explicitly isolationist, but more focused locally. And I see that as a good thing. I think tariffs are a way to do that. We saw with national security risks during the pandemic, if we're not making certain products, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just economic. People just look at the line goes up, boomer stock market approach, and it's like, no, there's obviously other concerns when it comes to making products beneficial for many reasons.
Yeah, I totally agree. Couple of points, unless Silas, you want to get in there.
I was just going to say, perhaps the next definition of an empire will be multi-planetary. So Musk being an American, perhaps that's like the route to take, where we land on Mars first and we can start to be the empire that makes the initial rules on that sphere,
on Mars.
Yeah, but we'd welcome China and whomever else to come out there, but with a different set of ground rules for that sphere. And then if it keeps working great long term, then it could reflect back onto the Earth. But that could be a new way to look at how an empire could still be an empire without taking over the planet or trying to, influence the planet too much.
Yeah, and I think that reality is kind of bent towards empire. I think it's a natural end of political systems. They just kind of they go that direction, and maybe there's a good version of an empire. Maybe there is an altruistic, non-corrupt empire. I don't know. It seems like a contradiction in terms, I think, with our modern kind of the way that we view like monarchies and dictatorships, and I think that we have it in our minds that an empire is a bad thing. It's kind of like it's like Hitler's the devil, it's just like built into our kind of subconscious that, any sort of an empire is a bad thing. But I think if there was proper meta ethics instilled at the foundations of the empire, it could work. So I'm not really arguing for it. I'm just kind of entertaining the idea. Do you agree that it seems like we've had kind of a demonization of an empire in our educational system?
I think that's fair to say. I think the issue with empire always comes down to the clash of cultures, and you almost have to completely colonize places under your culture, which, maybe if we weren't as we're just like, if we're going to conquer a place, we're going to conquer a place, and that includes every aspect of the culture. Do we have the power to do that now? I mean, do we have the will to do that, I guess, is the question. And then is it attainable to actually achieve within certain situations, different groups of people? Is that the ideal approach? Now, is there benefits to empire? I mean, sure, but are the downsides and I think long term, I don't know if empire is ever sustainable because we don't live in a homogenous world.
Mm-hmm.
There's many different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I think anytime you try to colonize over a long period of time, you get revolts, you get people that don't agree or aren't on the same page as you. And the British Empire had to retract into basically nothing now, whether it was its own doing or its inability to just
to maintain it all,
with all the risks. But I mean, you'd almost have to sustain that. You'd have to be extremely authoritarian in a lot of places to enact that. And at what cost, I guess, and is it actually practical?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like why communism doesn't work. There's always going to be somebody who's not going to go along with it.
Right.
There's always going to be people that are going to fight tooth and nail against you. And so then, yeah, you do have to become militaristic. You do have to become dictatorial, authoritarian, totalitarian, however you want to kind of word that. I also think that authoritarianism is one of those words that's kind of been demonized as well.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think that, I've heard people on the left say so many times, like, that's authoritarian. He's an authoritarian. And it's like, well, authority has been given to him through electoral processes. He actually does have a certain amount of authority in which to exercise that. Authoritarianism is not like inherently like a bad thing. Now, if you want to talk about totalitarianism or autocracy or some sort of, brutal dictatorship, that's different than just authoritarianism. And I think you use the word properly, though, of like, you would have to become authoritarian in order to crack down on cultures that, pose a threat.
Well, I mean, I think a modern example of that is Singapore, which is extremely authoritarian, and it has a multicultural society, but it's extremely efficient and
and safe, I've heard.
Yes, and so you don't deal with all of the crime issues because it's like the consequences. It's the same in Dubai too,
Yeah.
and people have talked about that. And there's again, going back to trade-offs with Thomas Sowell, there's always going to be trade-offs. It's either if you have total freedom, but you don't have a coherent culture, you have multicultural society, then achieving that without the consequence of crime and conflict and all of the different issues that we see in the West, I just don't like you. There's always going to be that trade-off. So if you want that, and people are pushing for that more in the U.S. and other places because they see, when you don't prosecute crime, when you allow people to identify as whatever they want, you get a lot of unintended consequences from that people are seeking more order. So, I mean, what I would say though, when it comes to empire, is I think it's more attainable with technocracy now, and that is the big China, because they have the ability to use technocratic means far beyond what we do because there's no pretense of like, oh, I'm going to take this to court. Yeah.
Mhm.
No. So that type of China is a threat in terms of if it produces that system well enough and uses technology to enforce it, then
Mhm.
it might be a lot more attainable to maintain order even under those circumstances.
How would you go about assessing the threat? Because I think that's what really identifying threats and then agreeing about what those threats are is basically the foundation of like of a cohesive polity. You know, it's always going to come down to threats, and that's why those threats are really useful politically to motivate. So like, you know, Donald Trump is their boogeyman. He's their existential threat. He's the meteor that is, hurtling towards Earth and is going to just destroy humanity as we know it. You know, that motivates voters. He's the new Hitler. He's actually worse than Hitler. And so that's what motivates people. And sometimes they're actual fictional or exaggerated threats, but sometimes they're actually real threats. So I've heard people say, "Oh, China's not that big of a deal. They're actually not that strong," or Russia's actually not that strong. They're about to fall any moment. And then I've heard people say, "Oh, the U.S. is actually really in a big trouble and China's positioned properly." How do we assess those threats? And how can we all start to agree on what those threats were? Because it seemed like back in the day, especially in the 90s, well, and the 2000s with, GWAT, the Global War on Terror, there was a bipartisan unified agreement that say, radical Islam and terrorism needs to kind of, we need to fight against that. And so, with the war in Iraq and stuff like that, there was actually bipartisan agreement about those wars. So I think that's the biggest, more meta issue. I'm kind of thinking more broader as opposed to newsy today. And that's just, how can we get on the same page with our fellow neighbors, our fellow countrymen, about who's actually a threat? Is it China? Is it Russia? I mean, the Dems seem to think that Russia is like, I mean, Putin's the new Hitler. So I think that's one of our biggest issues that we have as a culture today is identifying threats and then agreeing on those threats. So what's the best way to go about that?
Full
Or
on.
sorry, and my other question is China actually as much of a threat? What do you guys think on that? So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you're going to achieve coherence in the United States, you probably need full-on authoritarianism at this point. Take over all the media, take over all the schools, don't allow dissent. I mean,
That's what they've done.
Not that I am advocating that explicitly, but I'm just saying that in terms of getting people who see Putin as Hitler, who are think Trump is Hitler, Trump is Putin. It's all what you need a word to describe all these people, because Putin's not orange, man. He's shirtless horseback riding, man. I just don't think that that divide, at least, the people that are going to these protests who think Elon is Hitler because he did that salute by accident or whatever, that's the worst thing ever, right? Is just that. I don't know. I hate to say, I don't know if it's even worth trying to reach across that aisle on some level, because how is that even attainable at this point? We all have access to the same information. We saw that during COVID. It's like trying to tell someone, hey, this shit's not good, what they're trying to give us. Here's all this study. It's irrelevant. So I think over time, I think that perspective just needs to become more relevant itself. And I think you're starting to see that within the culture. And that's like the broader issue, is that there's a little bit more. I mean, there's almost consensus basically on most of the woke stuff among most people, is that, yeah, we shouldn't transition children, and maybe men and women's sports is bad. And you saw that's why Trump leaned to it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more normalization of what was considered taboo among people to even identify as like, yeah, I voted for Trump because of this. Like that, what you weren't even able to say that 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think to answer the broader question about being able to decide, how do we determine what threats are real? I think there's always going to be a subset that is going to be opposed to whatever. But at the same time, I think it will happen organically in a lot of situations, not on every issue, but I think a lot of them.
So I guess my approach on thinking about that is, what is, I guess, a threat to our Constitution, or what the United States agreed upon in the beginning. Like, so whatever is threatening that type of constitutional republic, then that should be assessed and agreed to pretty much in general upon everyone if you're reading the Constitution the same way. But perhaps there's a way to, create a new level of a constitution. You can call it a different word or something. And that's like an agreed upon, like, I don't know, assessment of what you would vote as, like, what's a threat to human life or to your freedom, or, it could be almost like a census type of thing. And that way everyone, kind of like voting, everyone participates and helps construct this new, like, for lack of a better word, like manifesto of the United States. And then from there we have like an agreed upon, like, assessment of what we want the United States to be. And then what becomes a threat to that would be likely China and other things that are like religions that are bent on domination or like conversion of the world, rather than free will or like the basic human rights or whatever. But
Yeah. Well, and I think appealing to majorities is like one of those things that it's a kind of an annoying thing that has to happen in this type of a democracy or whatever we live in. It's just like, but with the triumphant death of the corporate media, I think is going to be a huge game changer when it comes to actually, starting to agree on threats and stuff like that. And the boomers kind of passing away and kind of losing their power, and also because it's the boomers that they vote pretty hard, and they are the most likely to watch either Fox News or MSNBC or CNN or something, or traditional corporate media. So I think, with that's a huge, impact event that might actually have repercussions. And then I think culture, like shifting culture, making it cool to buy American, and making it uncool to buy Chinese crap. I think through movies, through music, stuff like that, I think it's possible to appeal to majorities and kind of, lack of a better term, kind of, steer the consciousness. I don't want to say brainwash, but just steer the consciousness towards, more patriotic type stuff. But there's a paradoxical thing that I keep seeing of like, liberty leads to licentiousness. Liberty leads to transgenderism, essentially. Um, and but we want to preserve liberty, but we don't want to go that far either. So there's kind of like, there's paradoxical aspects of all of this stuff. The same thing of like, and I think that's why utopian thinking is super dangerous. I think that's one of the threats that I see. It's more of like a meta threat, not a country or a place or a person, but it's more of like an idea, a concept, a way of thinking. Is utopian thinking is so dangerous to me. Every single time I see someone being dangerous, in my perception, it's usually because someone is standing in the way of their utopia, and even thinking of like the empire as being like maybe there's a good kind of empire. Like you said, Thomas Sowell always said there's no perfect situation, it's trade-offs. And that's basically him saying kind of the same thing, is it's that utopian thinking that really leads to conflict, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. I used to be like this, where it's like, man, if we just end the government and Bitcoin is the currency, then all those other problems will solve themselves. People just stop killing each other, right? I mean, and even I had that thought, like, well, if we just have free energy, then currency is
Yeah.
irrelevant, and we have true abundance everywhere.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that could solve a lot of issues for sure. But it, like with anything, if you just think in terms of like, well, it's just economics, or it's just having this one law or this one set of principles, and it's easy sometimes to think, because you want to be that way, like if we just did this one thing, this one trick will save our nation. I think it's broader than that, because you know, getting back to the question of how do we get people to agree on what's important, what's valuable, what the problems are. I think a huge way of achieving that long term is to have enact policies or things, whether it's at a national or state level, and have them work. Like
Yeah.
you people are looking at El Salvador right
Yeah.
now, um, because they became the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, and they were the most dangerous.
Yeah.
Now, what did it take to get there? You can say, oh, maybe they rounded up some people who weren't gang members, but generally speaking, I mean, again, trade offs, right?
Hmm.
So it's worked, and I'm sure there's going to be more models. Like Malay has kind of hinted at that, like,
Hmm.
and so is Trump a little bit. We're kind of hindered by certain legal processes, which we've seen with the judges ruling against anything Trump wants to do. But
Yeah.
um, I do think long term the answer will come organically, because there is still freedom out there in the world to do different things. And like with the tariff issue, if it works, if it brings back manufacturing, if it, you know, increases our ability to like trade more fairly, if that's the goal, and if it works, then people won't, they'll try to deny it, but if people feel it, um, that will change people's opinions on things. I think it goes the same for crime, the same for cultural issues. Sometimes you have to go that far to see, the drag show with the kid putting the dollar in the, to the drag queen, that, hey, I think this doesn't make sense. And I think most sane people, no matter their ideology, are going to see that. So long term, I think that's the most convincing argument you'll have, is reality actually improving in an
Hmm.
undeniable way, to where you're like, this
Hmm.
is better. And that's why communism never worked, because it did the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like competence. So if having a competent government that works, or having politicians or leaders that actually, like somebody like DeSantis, who's just like crushes it, like actually competent, actually runs the state properly. And you know what? I hate to say this, but Colorado is actually a pretty well run state. I don't want to say Denver, and there's a lot of problems there, but Colorado is actually a pretty well run state. Like when Yoli needed food stamps or something like that, or also her like disability, they were like super quick. Everybody was competent, and everything happened properly within a certain amount of time. We tried to do the same things in Texas, and it dragged on. It dragged on for way too long. Like, and maybe that's because Texas is a little bit less inclined to give people social safety net type stuff, but I mean, California is the same way. To like, it takes forever to do anything. Everybody who works for the government is an idiot. And so anyway, I just wanted to say, to your point about like competence, will actually, maybe it's kind of like the proof is in the pudding a little bit. And so if we can actually govern properly, if Trump's trade war actually turns out the way that he says it will, I think it's going to be hard to deny that in the end. I mean, I know they have a lot of people in a full-on hypnotic trance, but I think that those the I think that those I think their grip on people's minds is loosening. They're losing a lot of people. And so if Trump can pull it off, I think the Republicans will have a pretty solid, um, a pretty solid, future path of continuing win elections. And I think the biggest problem politically about the tariffs isn't whether or not they'll work. It's whether or not it's going to hurt the economy. So then he's going to lose the midterms. I think that's really the main like problem with a lot of like Republicans like not wanting to get on board with the tariffs, is because it might like have a push, or there might be like a backlash electorally, and there's only less than 2 years before that even goes down, and Republicans typically don't do as well in midterms, and if they lose the midterms, they're going to lose a lot of their power to enact legislation, and they haven't even passed anything really. I mean, maybe one or two things, and we're still waiting on that the tax cuts bill. I don't know what's taking so long. Maybe they're trying to wrangle cats in Congress, or maybe they're trying to just wait for the right time. But yeah, anyway, competence, I think, is really what Trump needs, and I think he knows that too. He says our success is going to be the ultimate proof of whether or not this common sense governance actually works. So I'm all for it. Actually, at this point, I was a little bit nervous because I really just can't. Me and my family, we can't really like handle another like recession, or like more like inflation, like stuff like that. So I'm kind of like, oh dude, don't rock the boat too much, just fix it. But maybe this is just what needs to be done. So I'm here for it. I think it's a huge, crazy gambit, and Trump plays for keeps. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think he does have some sort of ace up his sleeve that will kind of make the tariffs make more sense and make all the countries want to like even out the tariffs, the trading level more, because I feel like there is some sort of financial thing he's got brewing, whether it be maybe the recounting of the gold and revaluing it type of thing, or multiple things like that. I think there will be a point where all of a sudden America will get a burst of financial something, maybe from multiple ways, and we're going to be wanting to spend it basically.
Yeah.
And then that will make any country that has been lacking or not wanting to negotiate finally come to the table and lower or even out the tariffs or drop it to zero so they can trade fully. I feel like there's something like that that's coming, but like you guys are saying, I think the way forward is pretty much leading by example, and that goes locally and it goes globally.
Yeah, and the tricky part is that short-term pain for long-term gain. That's such a gamble in this political system, because we can't afford electorally and politically, we can't really afford a very long, like we need the shortest short-term pain as possible. So he needs to, if he's going to kind of crash the economy in order to fix it long term, like it needs to happen pretty quickly.
Well, I think Trump knows, him and his team know that there's realistically a 2-year time window because of the midterms. They can't count on that. Probably, it's such a razor thin margin.
Yeah.
And it just made me think about how Trump has this big, what is it? The 225 year, or is it 250?
Oh, 250 year.
250 year anniversary next summer. That's when Doge is going to wrap up. They got then busted out World's Fair for celebrating and all that.
Are they?
Yeah, he talked about restarting it, I think, in like Iowa and a few different places around the country. So I think there's a master plan that we haven't figured out yet. Now, that shows to me that they understand what the risks are, because when I look at the global economy, I'm like, this thing is, on my perspective, fragile.
Mm-hmm.
So any type of instability, like, could it trigger this kind of collapse within the banking sector? Could it set off any number of other things? And Trump, whatever people want to say, Trump is not naive about this stuff, and the people behind him, they must know, they must have information about, if X happens, it's okay because of Y. Like, we'll play it this way. I'm sure they've gamed out all these scenarios enough to know what the risks are. that has to still play out. But I'm kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt on that because they're not dumb. No matter what people want to say about the Trump administration, Trump's not dumb. So
Yeah.
what will come of it, we'll have to see. But I want to believe, if you want to reform a system, you're going to have disruption, and you're going to have to take risks for short-term pain for long-term gain. So can he show enough within that 2-year time frame? Because what's really important is the Democrats cannot get back into office because they'll undo all this stuff
Easily overnight.
Overnight, it's all done. So you have to set up Vance or whoever in 28. You have to actually show improvement.
Yeah. So they have for probably like 3 years to like kind of get it done, because then the primaries are going to start up, and then they're, it's going to get a lot of politicking is going to happen, and a lot of like decisions are probably going to be made in the public's minds, before 4 years from now. And we're also 2.5 months in or whatever. So like the clock is ticking, and I think the American people are just going to keep going back and forth until somebody can actually like show some real results.
Yeah, I think he does have some trump cards that will like accelerate the process whenever they need it, but they're probably testing to see how they can naturally let it unfold. Excuse me, but I think there's probably 3 or 4 major trump cards that are financial like boosts to Americans that are going to happen. And you can kind of think of them like Doge, the gold, and I think the AI move and
Yes.
investments, and then the computer chips coming over here.
Yes.
Once that's stable and like for sure happening, then all the stocks are going to go skyrocketing again, and there's going to be dividends paid out and all that type of stuff. I think they may even reform the dollar based on the gold recount type of thing, and
Interesting.
that would provide the stable trading ground to make those tariffs make even more sense yet again.
Well, I think a lot of people, even Thomas Sowell was making comparisons to the Great Depression, and how Trump is kind of playing with fire with it when it comes to these tariffs and the tariffs. And I hate the talking point that tariffs, all they are is a tax on the consumer. That's such a talking point. It's way more nuanced than that. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know that it's more nuanced than that. But we have a way different situation. I think that political commentators and even intellectuals and scholars, even like Thomas Sowell, they really want to have historical comparisons. But the problem is you can't really do that, because the technology is so much different now than it was in, the 20s or whatever. And so we also had a socialist president at that time, and it wasn't necessarily tariffs there were other fiscal policies from FDR that were kind of pushing us um, towards that Great Depression. So you can't just blame tariffs for the Great Depression, but that works on people. It works on people, so they'll say, "Oh, well, tariffs trigger." I heard on the news, the experts said that tariffs triggered the Great Depression, so we're actually on the brink of another Great Depression. We could go into another Great Depression, you guys. Oh my God, get everybody worked up, and then everybody's going to vote, and everybody's saying Trump is crazy. But there's so many. It's multifaceted. So it's not just the tariffs, kind of like you were saying, Silas. It's like there's bringing energy production, ramping up domestic energy production, and bringing down the costs of energy, while also bringing in investment. So Trump claims that he's got a little over like $2-3 trillion of committed investments, and that they're actually starting to build factories. And now these factories are going to be robotics type production facilities that are powered by AI. And so I think there's going to be a revolution, kind of an industrial revolution of we're going to be using robotics and AI to create products and to manufacture things again. The reason why manufacturing was offshored to China and other countries is because of the cheap labor. But if you don't need the cheap labor anymore, and we can just invest, say a few $1 trillion into domestic manufacturing through AI and through robotics, that kind of takes away the ace in the sleeve of China, because they're the ones who can, essentially force their people to work for super low wages, essentially. I mean, for all intents and purposes, slavery. So I think that's a part of the Trump card type strategy, is actually bringing that domestic production in and leaning into AI/robotics and leading the way in a new wave of product manufacturing. And so if they can pull that off, then we won't even need China anymore, because we could create cheap products ourselves. And the only thing that's really stopping these new factories that are robotics AI manufacturing facilities is energy production. But if we're deregulating and producing our own energy the way that Trump always wants to do, he said that they're doing energy production facilities in conjunction with the manufacturing facilities. And so there will be an energy production facility, whether that's, I don't know, liquid natural gas, or maybe even like some sort of nuclear um, energy production that's linked to the actual factory. Because the factory, all we need is abundant electricity and power and energy in order to kind of create cheap products. Let's just kick China out and take over. That's my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it is a way to get around the freaking slave labor issue,
Yeah,
and with even the robotic humanoids being able to potentially start mining in dangerous areas and all that type of stuff, it's going to open up all the precious metals and different like rare
rare earth.
earth. It's going to open all that up, and that will also increase the manufacturing everywhere.
You know what this reminds me of too is that a lot of this is ultimately dependent on us not going into the Green New Deal stuff, because that basically was handcuffing simultaneously all of these Western nations from being able to produce its own energy sustainably, and
That's right.
not needing and not having to reduce the cost of, or sorry, the standard of living for people. And so I think that is one of the biggest threats of Trump, is that he got out of the Paris Climate Accord, which was non-binding anyway, but regardless, he's enacting policies that are like, yeah, we're not putting energy into this because we're not going to be able to maintain civilization if we go towards net zero. It's impossible and it's anti-human.
Yeah.
And so not having those hurdles to deal with presents if it wasn't that way, if it was going towards the Green New Deal, China would continue to take over because they don't have to abide by that.
Yeah.
And so they'll just be the sole producer of everything, which I guess the globalists like for China to be that engine, because it's completely controlled and totalitarian. So I think, when it comes to these being able to mine, being able to produce energy, all of those issues, that is to me potentially the biggest threat of Trump, was being able to actually still produce energy, because that's what it comes down to. If you want to be a power and not just a block like the EU that's beholden to all these different entities, and you don't have any power locally, you need to produce energy.
Yep.
So,
and Russia doesn't have any limits. I mean, and China
no.
doesn't have any limits. India doesn't have any limits, and they actually don't produce. This is actually one of the biggest, like, climate change and stuff like that, and environmentalism was one of the main reasons why I started like kind of paying attention and switching, started getting red pilled, is because I was so angry that we were destroying the planet type of thing. And this is before I ever knew anything about politics or, or paying attention, but I just knew that we were destroying the world. That's just like, it was all of us driving our cars, our oil, like all this stuff. But then you start to look into, it's actually not the cars, it's actually the coal production, and liquid natural gas actually provided a pretty revolutionary way of producing energy that's actually really clean energy. And of course they demonized it immediately, documentaries like saying, oh, it's causing earthquakes in Beijing or some shit. There's fire coming out of the faucet because of the frackers and stuff. So but when I like actually realized the smoke and mirrors show of the environmental movement, it really was a huge red pilling moment for me. I listened to people like Bjorn Lomborg, who worked with Jordan Peterson in the UN, because they actually hired them to help like figure out energy policy at the UN. And of course they didn't listen to them or anything like that. But when you really look into people's work like that, you actually realize that, these countries like India, like Russia, like China's going to build, I think 100 new coal plants by the end of the year, and coal, there is some clean coal, but there's also dirty coal. There's different types of coal, and they don't care. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, we need to, we need to have the cleanest burning energy, which would be like liquid natural gas. But no, they're going to continue to burn coal, and there's nothing that we can do to stop them. The Paris Climate Accord didn't do anything. All it did was kneecap us and allow them to do whatever they want. And then when you take into consideration that the US only contributes about 13% of global emissions, I mean, these people, the liberals, would have you think that it's America, the United States, and because you drive your truck with your V8 engine, that's the reason, we probably contribute 98% of global emissions. And really, it's countries like China, Iran, and Russia that don't give a shit. And so it's a giant like smoke and mirrors. You need to flagellate yourself and handicap yourself while allowing other countries that don't have, values that align with liberty to do whatever they want. And so that was a big red pilling moment for me. And I agree with you that, that's going to be the crux of the situation. I don't see gas prices plummeting, but they are getting better. And I think it's going to take some time to ramp that up, but I think we should use it. If there's any time, like, I don't know if they were just saving the energy. Like they're like, oh, well, we're going to need all of that energy in Alaska someday. So we're not going to use it just as a matter of grand strategy. But I think it's just time to use it, especially when you have $37 trillion in debt and counting.
This makes me think of a really good point that Trump and his team should be making, is that what's probably the biggest contributor to carbon emissions is shipping.
That's right.
Those ships are release more CO2 than all the cars in the world combined. So if you want to make that argument about we need to reduce emissions, well, what's a great way to do that is to stop shipping products all over the world when you can produce it locally.
Totally.
That is, if they
100%.
want to use that argument, they should go full speed into that, because they'll probably have some cognitive dissonance about, well, no, it's not. Just shut up. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And you guys are full of shit because you want to reduce emissions.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
I think the Trump admin and maybe the right, time flies. So, Trump is already out of office essentially in my head. So the right generally needs to possibly use that as a talking point to win over some people that are more environmentally conscious. They just see MSNBC or CNN just demonizing the right because they don't care about the environment. I think they could win over a lot of people if they were able to convince them that, hey, like, we need to actually manufacture things because that cuts down on global emissions, because China uses dirty coal and other and they don't have the same regulatory processes when it comes to reducing their emissions that we do. We're a lot cleaner. We produce a lot cleaner energy, plus the shipping. So we can reduce global emissions by onshoring manufacturing and creating our own energy. And that's the best way to pretty much save the world if you guys really want to.
Yeah, and you can control your standards locally instead of having China having all those factories and coal plants. If you reduce the demand for that, then you're going to be able to actually hopefully have some better environmental outcomes if you're thinking globally.
Yeah.
And the economy can solve some of those issues, actually.
Yeah, and I think something that they're doing correctly, I think the Trump admin is doing something very good politically, and they are forcing the left to support the 10% side of a 90-10 issue, or the 20% side of an 80-20 issue. In the case of like transgenderism, that's like a 95-5 issue. And so they're doing a really good job of forcing the liberals or the Democrats to support policies or positions that a majority of people are not on the side of. And so while I would like to get all white pilled and hopeful and dare I say happy about the future, I think that we're definitely in the right, going the right direction when it comes to that, because it used to be the liberals that would do that. They would say, hey, we love the environment, and they hate the environment, whereas 95% of people would say, I want clean water and clean air and I don't like pollution and stuff like that. So they really lost their political magic. It's been kind of fascinating to see.
Well,
I think,
have you seen who's at these rallies?
is it a bunch of old?
Yeah, look at
people?
these. Look at the vibrancy here.
Yes. Hit me with a clip. Do we need to bring your clip in?
Oh, is it not playing?
There it is. Will you start it?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh my.
Hail to the thief. Look at those young kids there.
It's an energetic movement. Oh my.
Oh. We still got the same chance from 40 years ago.
Hey, Rick Rubin's in there.
Going to my dead show, putting my mask on and my booster, and yeah, dude. It just keeps going, man. They're done. And
especially
I saw another
with the Hitler shit.
That's no one gives a shit anymore.
I know.
It's I saw another clip of this girl. I think she was in New York, and she's like, "Where are all the young people? It's all old people. Like there's nobody out here that like, where's Gen Z?" And I'm like, well, on the male side, they think you're full of shit, and this is all propaganda.
What do you think, Silas, about that repetitive chanting? Does that sound like some sort of magical spell, black magic spell they're trying to cast or something? Are they trying to exert their will by just repeating it over and over again?
Yeah, and they think their numbers are proof of their movement. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but they're tracking like cell phones and stuff to see how many repeat protesters are traveling around, which happened during Kamala Harris's campaign. And it's similar like results. It's the same people that were at the Harris campaign that are like pretty much populating these rallies or protests or bulking them up, basically.
Yeah,
So,
to create basically a facade of popular support and passion.
Yeah.
And it
It's
just looks so fake, though. Because if that's the
Yeah.
case, you don't have just boomers out there.
yeah.
Who's the most active usually? It's like, and why would the boomers be out there? A, because they're retired. B,
They don't
'cause
have anything else to do.
yeah, they watch MSNBC. Hey, I can maybe I'll supplement my check with this funding from Indivisible to give me the pre-printed sign out there. I mean, that's definitely going on. But I think even beyond that, they just have to astroturf. It's the same as Kamala Harris. Like, if they weren't astroturfing, it would look way worse. But it
Yeah.
doesn't look good now. It doesn't have that critical mass that we saw during BLM, where it was like your friends are all going down there, everyone's like outraged, even though they can't articulate much, but they're still up. Yeah.
Occupy Wall Street had a pretty big push, you know, like they really, I don't know. I mean, protesting, it's kind of a lifestyle, it seems like. And, you know, it's like people like Soros or Act Blue or whoever else is like subsidizing, like somebody's got to subsidize these people. I remember right when COVID started, or during BLM, and it was like COVID and then BLM. I remember I went to a gas station. It was kind of late by my house in Beaumont, which is right off of the 10. And the 10 is kind of like something that it's like, it connects a lot of places. Like if somebody's going to come in from another state, they usually come in on the 10, and they were coming in. And so I went to this gas station. I saw this van with some people out, and they looked very like anarchic type people. And I could tell that they were from out of town. And I could tell they were going into LA to go like protest and stuff like that and to fuck shit up. And I just could feel that energy. I just knew that's what, and I always just thought it was so weird. I was like, man, these guys traveled in, or this group of people traveled in, and I could tell that they were dangerous in some sort of way, whether that's like a demonic type presence or a violent type protesting, rioting type presence or whatever. But I never put two and two together about how, you know, they're probably getting paid to come out here and do that. You know, I'm kind of like, how the hell do they have money to like just travel across the country just to go to a protest? That's what I was thinking. I'm like, so weird. And so somebody's funding it. I mean,
yeah. So I think a huge tip off to me that Antifa during 2020 and beyond, whatever is doing the Tesla, like firebombing and shit like that. When the 2020 election happened, there was riots all summer. You had chaos, and then the election happens. And if you remember, it took like 4 or 5 days for them to announce the results. And in those 4 or 5 days, there was nothing.
mm-hmm.
There was no protests. There was no nothing. And why? Or if you think about it organically in this uncertain time, hey, Orange Man might get another 4 years. We need to show up. We need to keep going. No, shock troops were told to stand down, clearly because the people that were in charge of running the election or were rigging it, knew that the outcome was in hand. And don't waste your time. Don't give them a reason to whatever.
Yeah.
And nothing happened.
Yeah.
After the election, nothing. It all pretty much went away. BLM went away.
Yeah.
Antifa, whatever you want, that type of energy is still out there, but it needs a catalyst. It needs people who are most likely being paid by Soros operatives or any other
NGOs.
organization. Yeah,
NGOs with their funding from USAID or whatever.
And, it's always at a riot. It's the person, you need that person that breaks the glass, so to speak. You need that person that throws the first brick. Yeah. And then organically people jump on like as a part of a crowd. Yeah. But you don't see that, especially that whole sequence in 2020 made me realize like, yeah, this is totally organized. And now you're getting pushback, but I just don't think it's working, Yeah. It's not, I mean, look at the people going to those protests. You don't have those kids out there. Like, it's not as convincing. It's convincing some people, but it's not. They're not able to achieve the same results. And I think you'll probably see they might try to pull some shit this summer because that's riot season, as we know. I don't think they got the same pull, and I think that you can't rob a bank, the same bank twice. So people are going to be aware of these tactics.
Yeah.
And Twitter was a huge catalyst for that too in 2020, and they don't have that anymore. So
I think they wasted their political capital. They kind of had like a few nuclear bombs, and they thought 2020 is the time. Pandemic, George Floyd, however many, J6, all these like nuclear bombs of psyops and false flags and, political manipulation through the media. They really used it. They had like, kind of like an energy bar on a video game. They had political capital, and then they just did COVID, BLM, J6, more COVID, Trump is a Hitler, Trump is Nazi, and then now they have no power anymore. They have no like ability. It's just like a kind of a lame duck type situation because they fucking squandered all of their credibility.
well,
Which is a good thing, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah. They're backed into a corner. They have to defend unpopular positions. I mean, basically, this is what the Democratic Party has become.
It's crazy.
Gotta love AI, man. It's,
Yeah.
really.
That's like MS-13 tattooed guys.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's why they're. I mean, no matter what they try to do, like supposedly there was a guy who was deported, who was not supposed to be deported.
Right.
Apparently, that guy was affiliated with MS-13, and I believe he was actually from El Salvador. So there's another case of a gay barber, hairstylist that, I don't know the specifics of it, but for the most part, and those are the traps of doing deportations to El Salvador because it can be used as a narrative, but even those cases as of now don't seem to be gaining any traction. And I think people in general, even Democrats, want to see people deported, especially the gang members. And then honestly, if you came in illegally, like you can't be here. We can do it. We don't have to deport you to El Salvador, but we can just you can book a flight now on the CBP One app the same way that they were flying people in. It's like, hey, we'll give you a free flight, and nice, maybe we'll give you some peanuts on the plane. We're gonna make it all nice for you, but you gotta go.
And they're given like a fast track back in if they self deport right through the app, like because that shows good faith or goodwill. That
Well, yeah, you don't lose the ability to apply for citizenship
right
later down the road. So it's like, do it now. If you get deported, you're not coming back for like 20. You can't come back for like 20 years. So I do think that a lot of that has to happen. I think a lot of the deportations will happen through self-deportation. If you just say, no, we're not giving funds, we're not incentivizing this in any way, your biggest incentive is to leave. I think another aspect that they could do is to tax remittances. So people sending money back home, just say like, you can't do that anymore. Maybe that'll cause crypto to go up, which I'm fine with. But you just need to put incentives in place to make it so that it's more difficult to stay in the country. And the Democrats were not doing that. They're making it extremely easy. And but yeah, getting back to like where the Democrats are at. They're in all these losing positions. They're not backing down really from the woke stuff. They're not backing down from like trying to pull these tactics again. And
Or
I mean,
doubling down on somebody like throwing somebody like Kamala and Obama out there.
yeah,
Obama's got nothing, no magic left, no political magic left.
he's done.
And yeah, and that, which I am so happy to see. I mean, that's like Schadenfreude for me, because I think he's just such a fucking demon. But sending Kamala out there to go, I told you. I don't want to say I told you so, but like that's what you're gonna do. You're really gonna do that. I think their best bet, I don't know, it's Cory Booker.
I don't even know. I think it's Gavin Newsom still.
No, you're right. I'm just joking with Cory Booker. I actually was pretty impressed with the 25-hour speech. I was like, I couldn't do that.
Yeah,
he had diapers on. That's all.
Yeah, Catherine. They're not backing away from the woke though, man. They're not. They're gonna keep going.
If you thought we were woke before, you done went and woke the beast. Welcome to Woke 2.0. All my woke warriors, give me a blue heart and share. Let's spread the love.
They ain't backing down, man. They're doubling down. Woke 2.0.
So if they have a blue heart, does that mean they're blue bloods? And that's what we're realizing, half the planet is a different race. Cold blue-blooded.
The ice people. The cold-hearted ice people. Well, when I see boomers like that, it just reminds me of somebody who wants to be cool so bad, like a poser. You know what I mean? Like they're just like, oh, they're just trying too hard. They're like a try hard, they want to be hip, they want to be cool, they want to be young. And in order to do that, you got to be at the protest. You got to dye your hair blue. You got to support the most progressive thing possible. You got to get Bernie bumper stickers on, like it's just, to me, it's like being a rebel. Like that's their version of being a rebel, is conforming to the cool, like the perceived cool thing of the day. Whereas like being a rebel actually means like thinking for yourself and not necessarily listening to the experts and, questioning authority and stuff like that. So it's just sad. I mean, honestly, like I see that clip and I just honestly just want to pray for the woman. But I also think, is that even real? Like, it's hard for me to believe it's real. You sent like a clip or a picture the other day and I was like, there's just no way that's real. That's got to be a right winger that's going in there to make them look bad,
Okay, well, since you say that, I do have another one of these. And I want to preface it by saying, if this is real, this is undoubtedly the cuck of the week. This can't be real.
Yes.
I am a 6'5" vegetarian, powered almost.
Oh, hold on.
I am a proud soy boy. I am a 6'5" vegetarian, powered almost exclusively by tofu and soy milk. I'm the guy bringing Beyond Burgers to the barbecue. And yet, despite what this bill seems to imply, big agriculture does not need protection from big, scary soy boys like me. I mean, look at me. I'm basically the Jolly Green Giant. The free market is supposed to let consumers decide what they want to eat. But apparently, Big Ag needs the state government to step in and make sure no one confuses an oat milk latte for cow milk. And while we're at it, let's talk about the fluoride ban. Fluoridated water is one of the most successful public health initiatives of all time. Are we really saying that the water is too woke now? That we need to give kids cavities to own the libs? Banning fluoride isn't policymaking, it's pandering to conspiracy theorists. At the end of the day, HB 651 isn't about protecting consumers. It's about protecting your buddies in big agriculture, using the power of the state to prop up their profits. So go ahead and make your jokes about soy boys and woke water, but let's not pretend that this bill is anything other than corporate handouts wrapped in tinfoil hat logic.
I think that's a good time for us to announce our first official sponsor of the podcast, the Fluoride Defense Network. Is your pineal gland feeling a little bit decalcified? Are you having moments of clarity and clear thinking? Is logic plaguing your thoughts? Well, sign up now for the Fluoride Defense Network and sign our petition to get fluoride back in your water today.
Recalcified.
You actually found somebody. That's gotta be fake?
Wow.
No, I mean,
I don't know. I mean,
Hard
the
to
arguments that he makes, I think he's trying to be clever. He's embracing the soy boy, dude. I think that's
it's
real.
real.
Because he was very. I didn't sense a hint of like satire, even though if he had a different tone, but he's got a very soy tone. So I think I'd like a genuine soy tone.
What was the like thing he was?
He must have been
protesting or
talking.
whatever?
If I'm gathering it right, I think he might be talking about not labeling soy milk and labeling it like bean juice or whatever fucking shit they want to call it. But
he was like talking about big ag or something.
well, yeah, because maybe the dairy industry wants to say that it's not milk, so you don't get to use that term. But I don't know. It was incoherent because I'm like, and then you go into fluoride. How do you go from soy milk to
Yeah.
fluoride?
That's why it felt fake to me, actually. How are you going to tie that in?
Our
I guess
woke water.
it's woke water. It says, as of April 6, 2025, the most prominent agriculture-related legislation in Florida is the 2025 Florida Farm Bill, formerly known as Senate Bill 700 in the Senate and House Bill 651 in the House, sponsored by Senator Keith Truenow and Representative Kaylee Tuck, and championed by Florida Agricultural Commissioner Wilton Simpson. This wide-ranging bill addresses multiple aspects of agriculture, consumer protection, and emergency preparedness. It was introduced ahead of the 2025 Florida legislative session, which began on March 4th, 2025, and is currently under consideration. Support for farmers and ranchers, consumer protections, and transparency requires honest labeling for plant-based food products, banning terms like meat or milk or poultry for non-animal derived items to prevent consumer confusion, creates an honest services registry for charitable organizations, highlighting those free or foreign funding from countries of concern and increasing transparency in charitable solicitation. So yeah, it was something like that. Controversial provisions. Fluoride ban in public water systems includes language prohibiting additives like fluoride in public water systems unless they meet a strict definition of water quality additive, sparking debate over public health concerns. What would we do without the fluoride in our water, guys? Insane. I mean, probably good legislation. I mean, I'm assuming, that's eventually going to get to DeSantis, and I'm sure he's going to, I'm sure he's for it. I don't see him vetoing something like that.
We need to keep our water woke in these blue states here. Start working out and, gaining testosterone, and they have less calcium in their brain. They might not want to be gay.
They might not want to be gay if they eat meat, guys. Jeez.
I don't I do see this becoming more, and that's why we want to thank Fluoride Defense Action Network for being such a gracious sponsor, because I do think they see the problem as more people question this sacred chemical of ours. And I do think we should look into selling fluoride tabs for all those left without their woke water, who are desoying their mind. I think it's really important because it's dangerous.
And I think they're developing some pouches, kind of like a Zyn. And then also I think a vape pen is coming soon. Fluoride vape pen coming soon.
They need that ice flavor. Just get it straight to the dome. Extra aluminum in there.
There's, I mean, I use the phrase like there's got to be something in the water a lot, and there
There is. Admitted.
Isn't RFK Jr. trying to do something about fluoride? I thought I saw a headline or something.
Yeah, I'm curious what he can do on a national level. I've heard that it has to happen locally, but
Yeah, state or city by city.
I mean, maybe if they, but at the same time, if HHS or the FDA could say this is literally a toxin and we shouldn't be,
I think
you're
that's
not
what
allowed
happened.
to.
Yeah, I think they declared it like for sure as a toxin, and
Yeah.
no trace of it is a good trace of it.
Right.
Man, there's a bunch of information. I just put RFK Jr. fluoride in water, and there's a lot here.
Yeah, so he is doing something about it, or making moves at least.
I guess skip to the end. Current status as of April 6, 2025. RFK Jr.'s role in the Trump administration remains unconfirmed. What? Pending Senate approval. What the hell are you talking about? This thing needs to get updated.
Oh no.
He's been confirmed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Utah became the first state to ban fluoride in water effective May 7, 2025. What?
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, okay. Effective May 7th. I'm like, wait, hold on. It's not May 7th. A move, some attribute to his influence, though local factors also played a role. In Florida, the Farm Bill's fluoride provision is still under legislative review, with a potential effective date of July 1st, 2025, if passed. RFK Jr.'s push continues to spark debate, pitting his skepticism against a robust scientific consensus. What is the scientific consensus? That it's good that fluoride... these people.
It's safe and effective.
God. Trust the experts.
I mean, we do have to consider, though, the downsides of removing fluoride from the water, because what's going to happen to guys like this?
Hi, RFK. You want to come take my meds? You can take them. Come on, Bobby. Bobby and Donnie, come on. You can get my meds. Come on, it'll be fun. You want to take them? You want to take my meds? You want to take my friend's meds, too? We'll all get together. We'll go off. I'm going to go off them. Do you want me to go off them now? I will go off them because I want to. I want to go off them. I'm going to go off them just for you, Bobby. You want to come join me? It'll be fun. Let's get this party started.
Whoa. I think he already went off the meds, right?
Or he's still on them. I mean, if he got off them, he'd probably be a little bit more normal now.
Yeah, that's true.
Golly,
that guy needs a lot of fluoride, man. I don't know.
You need to calcify that pineal gland, baby. Asking
worth
too many questions.
Not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, so Trump has signed an executive order.
Interesting.
Establishing World Autism Awareness Day. On World Autism Awareness Day, we recognize the millions of Americans living with autism spectrum disorder. Their proud perseverance in overcoming tremendous hurdles is emblematic of the strength and grit that makes America great. The First Lady and I extend our heartfelt appreciation to the families, friends, and communities aiding Americans with ASD as we empower every citizen to take part in and shape our new golden age. Autism now affects 1 in 36 children in the United States, a staggering increase from the 1980s, when the disorder was found in only 1 to 4 out of every 10,000 individuals. I created the Make America Healthy Again Commission to investigate and address the root causes of our escalating health crisis, with a focus on childhood disorders like autism. As a part of this effort, my administration is prioritizing gold standard research and increasing transparency to gain new insights to aid those with ASD. So, skipping to the bottom. Now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, by virtue of authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim April 2nd, 2025, as World Autism Awareness Day. I call upon all Americans to learn more about the signs of autism to improve early diagnosis, understand the challenges faced by individuals with autism, and find ways to support those with autism and their families. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was just kind of scrolling through the whitehouse.gov website, and I saw that, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And he did that on the same day as the Liberation Day, which I thought was cool. I don't know where autism comes from. There's a lot of people that do speculate that it comes from vaccines. I don't see evidence of that. I think what people would say, I've done a bit of research into it, and I think what people would say is that the reason why we have more cases of autism is because we're looking for autism now, and it's kind of a somewhat newer disorder or whatever. But also, since it's a spectrum, there's multiple different types of neurodivergent traits that fall under autism. So if you start investigating that and looking for those, then you're obviously going to see a rise in results. But at the same time, I think vaccines are just pretty much from the devil, and everything that's bad in this world is pretty much caused by them. So I don't know what to believe at this point, guys.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of evidence that autism is actually increased. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. It's actually overblown, and that you're wrong. Shut up. Go back to sleep.
Why do you think it's true that there's been a rise of autism?
Again, I'm not an autism expert, so I rely on the experts in this. And rather than an increase in autism, has been an increase in what the definition of the broader spectrum of things that would never cause autism now.
Laugh! Yay!
So there's
Shut up!
there's no
Why would you clap for
indication at all
Right?
of an increase, even though there are a lot of people that say it is.
No indication.
There's one phrase that just triggers me, like a liberal, like a they them being misgendered or dead named. It triggers me. So is this phrase, there's no evidence that. And I hate that phrase so much, because it's such a disingenuous thing. I mean, how hard did you look? Just because you haven't seen the evidence doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you would have to have godlike omniscience to know that there's no evidence that there was significant voter fraud in the 2020 election, or that
Yeah.
the vaccine is linked to myocarditis or any other side effects and stuff like that. So I hate that phrase so much. They lean on it so much. Like it's
Mhm.
whenever it should be a red flag to anybody out there that's trying to navigate propaganda. Whenever they say there's no evidence, that it's essentially just propaganda.
Well, the phrase that really triggered me was, I trust the experts on this. And that's a similar thing. It's like,
Totally.
well, if you're trusting them, you haven't personally done the research, so you shouldn't make a statement on it. You should just,
That's right.
not
And
comment.
you're violating the logical fallacy of appealing to authority.
Right.
It's literally, it's in the book. It's in the logic book, guys. You can't form a conclusion based off of authority. Just because an expert says, or just because a scientist says, or just because someone in authority says, or just because the Pope says, to hit it from the other side, is that does not mean that it's true. You have to actually dig into it to form a conclusion. You cannot just rely on trusting the experts. And if you are, then you have to be more humble in your epistemic claims and say, well, I will say that it's highly likely, or a higher percentage, that this is the truth because the experts say that. Not, this is 100% the truth. It's 100% safe and effective because the experts said. Like, this is like basic logic. Like, I can't understand why people are so susceptible to that
Well, not
argumentation.
only that, he says, I'm not an expert in this, but there's no indication that there's been a rise.
And then he goes to speak like an expert.
But because, here's the thing, because I trust the experts, I am now endowed with this power, and there's no indication. Like, shut the
Yeah. I'm glad he's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I have a hard time saying what I think actually about that guy. Because I feel like maybe I shouldn't.
RFK put it well in his book, is what I've heard. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard his book about Fauci. It just covers everything that you need to know, and it's not even about COVID.
Yeah. It's actually about that AIDS stuff, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, didn't some children die from orphanages who they were basically forced into taking this drug, and they're wards of the state, so no one could consent for them other than this. It was super messed up what happened there.
Yeah, and Bill Gates has similar stuff too. And you know what's funny is they accuse RFK Jr. of the same thing. Classic.
Oh yeah, he killed people because they didn't allow he pushed against the vaccine.
Yeah. Aye. Well, I don't know if you guys know, but there's a raging measles pandemic.
Oh yeah. Actually, right before we went on, RFK posted about I went down there and we've started clinics to give out the MMR vaccine. This is the best way.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, wait, what the fuck? RFK is pushing the MMR openly now? Very weird.
Can you find that?
And very disappointing. Yeah, let me pull it up real quick here.
So maybe Israel is.
Oh, really?
There's supposedly blackmail on him, and everyone thinks it's Israel, right? That's the new rumor. So
that's
any weird thing that he does, I just assume some backdoor, hey, you better.
Yeah. Well, I guess Candace Owens' argument is that he used to be a drug addict. He used to do bad sexual things, and the fact that he's friends with Rabbi Shmuley, those two facts means that he must have some sort of blackmail on RFK Jr. I don't know. It's possible he's just friends with the guy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's not proof of blackmail, but just the fishy things he says, all of a sudden, it seems.
Yeah, it is a little odd sometimes where I question some things. Here's the post. I came to Gaines County, Texas today to comfort the Hillebrand family after the loss of their 8-year-old daughter, Daisy. I got to know the family after she passed away. I'm also here to support Texas health officials to learn how HHS can better partner with them to control the measles outbreak. And in early March, I deployed a CDC team to bolster local state capacity for response across multiple Texas regions, supply pharmacies and Texas-run clinics with needed MMR vaccines, other medicines, medical supplies, work with local schools, yada, yada, yada. The most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine. I've spoken with Abbott. I've offered HHS support at his request. We have redeployed CDC teams to Texas. So that line is, it's going against a lot of what he's saying.
So is that an mRNA vaccine or
no? I don't think. No, it's MMR. But he's definitely. I mean, he's questioned all of these, and I think the reason you're seeing these measles outbreaks. Who knows if they're leaking them out of a lab at this point just because RFK's in there. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but to then leverage him to say, what are you going to be, Mr. Measles? And you're going to, but it's frustrating that it's not dude, just hold the line. They're going to do this regardless. They're going to do this on every vaccine. We're going to get a polio outbreak, supposed. We're going to get I don't know, it's HPV, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's going to come around.
Yeah. And I think a reasonable extrapolation is saying like they leaked that COVID virus. I mean, I'm just going to say it. They leaked that shit on purpose to rig an election. They did that. They created it
probably
in a
for
lab.
multiple reasons, the election being one.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's just is what it is. And I think even the CIA and all kinds of different, media outlets and everybody is saying that that's actually what happened. Not necessarily that it was released because on purpose, but it did come from that lab and it was leaked out of that lab. So we know that there is at least one pretty prominent event where a super deadly virus was leaked out of a lab, purposeful or not. I mean, I think they did it on purpose. I don't really believe in coincidences that much.
Does this vaccine actually have some studies behind it or anything, or is it
No,
similar to
I mean,
COVID?
MMR definitely has more studies than
More long-term
COVID,
Right.
But all studies with vaccines are problematic because they don't use a actual placebo. They use another vaccine as the placebo. There's a lot of issues with vaccine studies in general. I can't say I'm like super. I've read a bit, but I'm not gonna. People might correct me on it, but there's issues with long-term testing and how they actually do the studies, to where that was a big part of RFK getting in there, is to say we need actual studies on these vaccines.
Yeah.
I've also heard that these studies are considered private entity information, so they don't have to release every study they do. They only release the ones that point towards the positive for their vaccine,
Right.
or whatever product it is.
Yeah, it's with other medications too, which is super shady. I mean, I really, if you're gonna do something with vaccines, I mean, start with at the very least pulling the COVID shot off the schedule, and then maybe just pull the COVID shot in general. But you can just say like, we don't recommend this for babies,
Yeah.
for 6-month-olds.
Yes.
Like at the very least, pull that shit.
I mean, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, sitting here thinking that we are injecting babies with a fucking COVID shot.
Oh, dude, I know.
They are not even a demographic that is at risk to COVID. Not only that, but we know that there are side effects of myocarditis and other side effects in younger people that don't need it. Not only that, but the damn death rate is way too low. And not only that, but we have ways to treat it. It's absolutely insane. I think it's an actual crime against humanity. I'm at this point, I'm just I have to calm down.
Well, this won't help you calm down because
all right.
Did you see Dr. Bowden on Tucker Carlson this week? Because she talked about this very issue.
Yeah, I saw
and
some clips.
I'll play this clip, and it's definitely worth listening to the whole podcast. But it's just egregious that this is still happening on this level.
According to VAERS, there have been 38,000 deaths from these COVID shots. So under normal circumstances, the FDA would have pulled it. But instead, they've doubled down. They've put the shots on the childhood vaccine schedule. All babies are expected to get 3 COVID shots by the time they're 9 months old. The shots are still under EUA status for this age group. So under 12, they're not even fully approved by the FDA, and yet they're on the vaccine schedule. And according to the CDC, 9 million American children have gotten the latest version of these COVID shots.
Actually?
Yes.
Still?
Yes. 9 million. 12%. The concern I have with these kids, so we know myocarditis.
Wait, this is going on right now?
Yes.
I think we voted against this.
Yeah.
Correct?
I don't know.
You're very diplomatic. But I'm just stunned to learn that that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Could this be shut down?
It should have been shut down a long time ago. And what's the
9 million babies have had COVID shots?
Yeah, well, children. Minors.
Bring the energy up with that clip, huh? That's
Wow.
depressing.
We're obviously going to see the effects of that.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot more heart disease, a lot more young heart attacks, a lot more side effects. There's no way you can just scramble people's DNA like that and not see side effects. I mean, it's mad science. I mean, it's worse than Mengele. I mean, this is worse than fucking Mengele. The Nazis wouldn't even have done this shit.
People don't see, people cheer it on. What's crazy in this podcast, she says that giving babies this shot and knowing the risk of myocarditis, babies can't tell you when something has gone wrong. They can't verbalize that, hey, I'm feeling this tightness in my chest or whatever other symptoms there might be.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, I mean, you could see like 4-year-olds who are like, oh, I'm playing t-ball for the first time, and have a collapse on the field.
Totally. We're going to see that.
It's so, yeah, I mean, you're still speechless. And that's to Tucker's point. It's like, yeah, I think here's the thing about Tucker Carlson. The White House watches every show.
For sure.
They know. So when Tucker brings on somebody like that, and he's smart. I think he plays that like, wait, that's still going on? Like,
he knows.
That.
Yeah. He's an expert propagandist.
Yeah. So he is.
I think he's CIA, by the way, or some sort of.
I
think he's intelligence or something.
I still like him though.
Oh, I like him too. I actually think that he's one of the good ones.
Yeah.
I think there's a shadow war, intelligence shadow war that's going on, and I think that Tucker's one of the good ones. I think there's a lot of propagandists that are CIA agents or some sort of intelligence agents, whether that's from foreign nations or from our own, or DNI or CIA or whatever. I think for sure. I think he's some sort of intelligence operative. He applied to the CIA. I know his dad was involved in military and stuff like that too. And I also think that Jim Morrison was some sort of CIA agent as well.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think, what I'm saying is when he's having this guest on, and there's other examples of this, it's in some ways to send a message to the White House.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Trump knows his base hates the COVID shot.
Well, I mean,
RFK got in there for that reason.
I think half of his base, I don't think it's as much of a majority as you're saying. I think half of his base.
You still think it's half? Really?
Yes, because I think half of his base is boomers that took it.
Well,
that are afraid of these older boomers that are afraid. I mean, I know my grandpa, who just passed away, unfortunately, he took the COVID shot, and that kind of like gave him his life back, as it were, because he was like, oh, well, now that we have the vaccine, I can actually leave my house. I mean, my grandpa was stuck in his house for 2 years. He couldn't even come to my mom's house because him and his wife were so afraid of it because they're old, and then he started having heart problems actually after he took the vaccine. But I think that for a lot of people that are more in the older category, I think that they actually, they're still getting boosted. I don't think it's just the young libtards, the blue-haired libtards that are getting boosted.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably still a good minority of Trump supporters that are on board with it. I still think, at the very least, even if, because, Trump promoted the vaccine, a lot of Trump supporters took it.
He still won't say that it was bad or anything.
That is one of his biggest Achilles heels, obviously, which is probably why they made him the father of the vaccine, because he couldn't fully come out against it because of his ego.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, that if you're going to make him, and somebody else, actually, that doctor challenged Callie Means, the doctor that is, I don't know if you've seen him around. He's a big part of like Maha. movement, and she challenged him about, is Trump going to take this off the schedule? Is Trump going to remove and he kind of was evasive.
Can he though?
Oh yeah.
Where is that decided? Because I know California has their own schedule.
Well, it's based on the CDC's recommendation.
Okay.
Though. So if the CDC recommends it, that's how it gets on the schedule. I mean, they can pull if they really wanted to, they could pull the EUA.
Yeah.
They could push for it. They could pull. I mean, they could pull the whole. At the very least, they just say like, we don't recommend this. Like that's at least saying something. That's what Florida did.
Well,
I don't think they give it out anymore. Actually,
I want to stick up for RFK Jr. just for a second, even though he's a Mossad agent at this point. I think that he has been pretty consistent in saying, I'm not against vaccines. I just want better science. But he also says that no vaccine is 100% safe and effective for all people. So maybe he does support some vaccines, but not others. See, I'm actually, that's where me and him disagree. I think he's a little bit more like, well, I'm going to look at the studies and see if, see what the side effects are for this amount of people or whatever, and look at the trials and stuff like that. I won't do that. I'm not even going to give them one moment of validation, because I think that they're wrong in principle. I disagree with them in principle. RFK Jr. doesn't disagree with vaccines in principle. So maybe measles is one of those ones where he does support it. So I'll stick up for him in the fact that he may be being consistent in saying he supports some vaccines and he's not completely anti-vax. And maybe this is one of those times, and then maybe he's thinking, well, there's some bigger moves we want to make, and I need to avoid the political fallout of this measles thing by at least going out there and making a political statement that says, hey, we're going to give the MMR vaccines, we're helping them, or whatever. I agree with you. I think it's kind of crazy that he would say the best way, to mitigate this situation with the measles is to, have everyone take the MMR. It's definitely concerning.
I think he is refreshing studies on a lot of vaccines too, like starting up new versions or studies so that he can get a fresh data set on top of the existing ones.
Well, they need to stop the schedule altogether, in my opinion. The entire thing. I mean, I think there's like 50.
No, there's like 70 now.
Yeah. So something there's like 70.
Yeah.
Some of them are like multiple rounds.
Right. It's
or
just
whatever.
A flu shot every year, pretty much. But
yeah. Or I think like some of the DTaP and a couple other ones, it's like
them.
You have to take multiple times or like a couple of times. And then of course, like also like flu vaccines and the COVID vaccine, they're trying to make it like a fucking yearly thing. Of course, they sold it as you're going to take this shot and it's basically you're going to be safe and healthy for the rest of your life. And it's like, no, actually, you guys want us taking this thing, boosting fucking 4, 5, 6 times. Actually, it's every year. Now it's every year. They push left and normalize, or they push crazy and normalize. So now it's normal that, well, we always take our flu shot every year, so we also take our COVID shot every year too, because it comes around,
Yeah, it's a scandal. One of the worst, because it affects people's health and all the side effects from all the even trusted shots, like you're saying. It's just,
do we need to be shooting do we need to be jabbing these babies the second they come out of the womb? That's my question. Do we really need to be doing that? No.
Well, I think I know why they do that. Because they want to kill them. No, I'm just kidding. That's
depopulation.
You could always go there. But I think honestly, a big part of it is, hey, we already gave your child a couple vaccines. They're all right. So the earlier it's like a drug.
like the earlier you get somebody who's they've normalized the act of doing that to their child, the less resistance they're going to have. Because if you say like, we're not going to start this until they're like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Then by then you would have been like, you know what? My child's they haven't gotten sick.
Yeah.
They don't have this issue. So the earlier you do it, the less comparison. For one, if you then vaccinate at 6 and be like, dude, my kid never used to get sick all the time. Now he's getting sick all the time. You don't have that comparison. So there's a huge part of that.
And it's similar to transgenderism. If transgenderism is true, it needs to be pushed towards the soonest possibility, so that way you can stop them going through puberty. Because if somebody actually is a man born in a woman's body or vice versa, then you should stop them from going through puberty, because puberty is going to accelerate their path into that gender. And so, of course, like all demonic like things, it always comes down to, it always comes down to the kids, So, but you're right, though. I think it does normalize that for people. And it also, if a parent it's similar with abortion, because women that have had abortions are more likely to be pro-choice, because you would have to come to terms with the fact that you poisoned your child purposefully, or you transitioned your child purposefully without knowing the truth, and you actually did damage to your child, or you killed your child in the womb, or whatever. And so it becomes harder for a person to look that moral that moral abomination of an act in the face and come to terms with it. And I respect people, especially women that have had abortions, that come around and say, hey, actually, I do regret this, and this is actually, I do think it was murder and stuff. I have such respect for people that are actually willing to have skin in the game, in that fact, that moral skin in the game, and say, hey, I messed up actually, and I don't think you should follow in those same footsteps, And I don't know if you saw, there was one clip going around of a anti-abortion, not necessarily an activist, maybe an activist, but she gets assaulted.
Oh yeah, she got assaulted. I did see that. Yeah.
Yep. And it's like, oh yeah, it's perfectly okay to get violent against somebody who's speaking out for the most vulnerable and weakest voices and weakest of those in our society, and then also they continue to arrest people in the UK for just, did you know it's illegal if you live within a certain distance of an abortion clinic in the UK, that it's illegal for you to pray in your own house?
In your own house. Yeah, I did see that. How dare you?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Well,
so I didn't mean to steer it towards abortion, but
now that you have, I do want to bring up our This Week in Satanism clip.
Oh, yes. Okay.
This comes from the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Colorado, who loves to talk about abortion in a really positive way, and I think it's good to have a different perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
That savings comes from the averted births that will not occur because abortions happened instead. So a birth is more expensive than an abortion.
That's right.
So the savings comes in Medicaid births that will not occur. This bill will actually decrease costs for our healthcare policy and financing department, our Medicaid expenditures in both this year and out years, as the savings from averted births outweigh the cost of covering reproductive health care for all Coloradans. This bill requires all abortion services to be state funded. The bill requires an increase to general fund of 1.5 million to cover the cost for care. But again, a reminder that ultimately the state will see a cost savings. And ultimately, it is truly an honor to be here carrying this bill alongside Rep. Garcia, and I ask for your support of Senate Bill 183.
This is utilitarianism, consequentialism. It's the natural end, the telos of postmodernism and utilitarianism, and the lack of understanding about foundationalist ethics. It's disgusting to think that, like you always say, make line go up, right? If we can just murder a bunch of babies to make the line go up, because you have to follow that to its absurd conclusion, right? So if it's okay to kill innocent young babies that just haven't come out of the womb yet because it's more financially prudent, it's more expensive to have a baby, well, then that, if you follow that logic to its absurd conclusion, then we should be murdering old people too. We should be getting rid of kids. What's the difference of it being inside the womb or outside of the womb? If just because it's outside of the womb doesn't mean you can't, kill a 2-year-old because I can't afford it.
Yeah, think of the savings we could get from eliminating all those special needs kids. I mean, the line goes up.
Yes, and we have eradicated Down syndrome, by the way. And we didn't use vaccines to do it.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
That's a cost savings.
It's true, though. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, okay, I know it's crazy, but if we go ahead and commit that genocide will save Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, roads and shit, schools. Think of the kids.
Y'all.
There'll be less people in classes, less people on the roads. Groceries will go down because there's less people eating food. It's amazing. We'll just kill a couple billion, Problem solved.
Sounds like Margaret Sanger.
Oh, yes, Margaret Sanger. Okay, I'm done with that. I don't think she was a Southern woman, but
maybe she was. Sounded about right. Well, I think I'm definitely disappointed in that RFK Jr. thing, and I'm also pissed off at Trump for not ending that war sooner. Are we going to see an end to the war?
There's a lot of people that seem to want to keep it going. It's weird. I don't know. And it's always just been weird that there's such an attack on Russia from certain, establishments, the UN, and so it's like there's something else that seems to be driving that war. That's not just the negotiations that Trump is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something in the background. They're trying to figure out how to pretty much bring that to peace or at bay so that the surface stuff can be resolved in the right way.
Yeah.
But it's probably all the black market stuff because there's so much that was going through Ukraine and it ramped up, I'm sure, during the war through all that disruption. So
wars seem to make people rich. So there's like some sort of perverse incentive to keeping wars going. And it's another thing that popped into my mind is that, following the logic to its absurd conclusion. And one of those arguments and this is a bipartisan issue. There's people on the right that are all about that war in Ukraine and want to keep funding Ukraine. Right. So a lot of times their argument is like, well, Russia is an evil nation as one of our enemies. And if we could weaken our enemy by sending a bunch of Ukrainian soldiers in there to just kind of whittle away at Russia's army, that's actually good for us in the long term. Well, if you follow that logic to its absurd conclusion, then we should probably start a war between China and someone else. Like, we should start a war between China and India. because we can just throw a bunch of Indians at the Chinese military to weaken the Chinese military. What a crazy way to think, as opposed to thinking maybe we can just not agitate Putin. Maybe we could just adhere to our original agreements with Putin. I mean, it's just insane that you could even think that way. I think that's such a demonic way of thinking, that okay, we're going to sacrifice an entire generation of Ukrainians just so we might weaken Russia.
Yeah, and it's only a slight weakening. It's nothing like that's really going to help them. And so, didn't Russia prevent Yemen from getting attacked the first time, at least,
I thought it was Syria.
or Syria?
Yeah, it was Syria.
Ye-
That's why
okay.
Assad's in
And then,
Russia now.
yeah, okay.
And Syria is looking really, really good now. It's pretty amazing what's happened to Syria. It's just transformed overnight. It's being
Yeah.
run like super well, and
It
they're
was the
really
right
treating
thing
people.
to do, I guess.
Yeah,
Huh?
they're really treating people well over there. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who's the new leadership over there?
It's broken up in regions right
Okay.
now, I think, right?
Osama is Usama.
Another Osama. Nice.
I think it's Al Qaeda though. I mean,
Oh,
I
wow.
saw a clip that I thought it was interesting. It was a little too long to show on the show, but it was the leader of the Taliban, or one of the leaders, at least one of the faces of the Taliban in Afghanistan, saying that that Afghanistan is open for business, and that they want to welcome in any companies that, or any countries that want to come and do business, as far as minerals deals and any sort of manufacturing or any sort of trade. And I thought that was a really unique move for them. And he said he was willing to reset the relationship between the US and Afghanistan even after a 20-year war, which I thought was maybe a good thing. And maybe it's a good thing that they're open for business, but they also have, what a lot of people would call like human rights violations, as far as like not allowing women to even be educated and stuff like that. So I guess my question with that was, do we have to avoid doing any business with somebody who might be, I don't know, engaging in some sort of civil rights violations, just out of moral principle, do we have the moral responsibility as a more powerful nation to go in there and to tell them to stop doing that?
Man, I mean, it's hard because that didn't really work out well. Obviously that wasn't our goal necessarily. Hard to even know what the goal was in Afghanistan at this point, but
weapons sales.
Yeah, getting a pipeline built probably, and getting the opium flowing. But I mean, I struggle with that because there's a ramp up in Iran going on right now, and I'm very much opposed to starting a war in Iran. I think we would not win that war, and we drag in Russia. They have like hypersonic missiles. There's a reason the U.S. hasn't attacked Iran. They've done it to every other country. That was on the Wes Clark 7, if you're aware of that, where he said we're going to attack 7 countries in 5 years. That was right after 9/11. Somebody in the Pentagon told him that. And they were all Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Somalia. What's the other one? Gaddafi, Libya, and then Iran. And Iran is literally the only country we haven't done.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not wise for a lot of reasons. And obviously you can critique Iran in many ways for their situation.
Yeah.
But I just want the U.S. out of the Middle East altogether, like completely. As much as it's fucked in terms of the culture.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, I don't know, it might be. You could make the argument to go back in there for the man-boy love going on. But.
I mean, I think that it is true that you know, in order for evil to, you know, for evil to grow, all it requires is for good men to do nothing, kind of thing. I can't remember the exact quote, but
Yeah. You know, like doing deals with the Taliban, I think it should be a pretty all open market world trade, like, because I think prosperity and general, like, if you feel like you're secure in your organization or nation, then you will do less of an outreach to like get resources and like attack other things. But you know, we do deals with all these countries that are doing horrible things.
China with their one child policy, they're pretty, you know, the Uyghur concentration camps, the pretty much for all intents and purposes slave labor. I mean,
Mhm.
we buy all kinds of crap from them.
Yeah, so that's kind of the first thought that came to mind, is like we're already trading with people that are, you know, opposite of our intended morals as the United States.
Yeah,
So
Saudi Arabia, Jesus.
yeah. So I do think there's a, you know, that peace through strength type of mentality, but it should be peace through strength and prosperity type of mentality, because like I said, I think the richer people are, the more complacent they also become, even if
Mhm.
you're on the like conquering side.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's one of the arguments for, you know, getting third world countries onto fossil fuels is that the richer nations become, the more they care about the environment. So the more poor that they are, they don't care. Like it's just a kind of just one of those things. It's just a fact that people in richer nations, they care a little bit more about the environment. People that are living in third world nations that don't have access to fossil fuels, they're going to burn burn wood, and they're going to burn dung and cardboard and trash and plastic and stuff like that in order to stay warm and stuff like that. So and you can't care about the world outside of you or the world in 100 years or 1,000 years if you're too busy trying to figure out how the hell you're going to eat that night. You know, you're too busy trying to figure out food source. And so there's a moral case for fossil fuels. And I think that the modern nations really kind of want to stop, you know, nations in Africa specifically from engaging in fossil fuels, or you know, in the mining and usage of fossil fuels, because it's going to cause, you know, global emissions to go up. But really the global emissions from those places are greater because they're poor. And so there is a moral case for fossil fuels in developing countries, you know, and then also the coal situation too
mhm.
in second world countries. So, you know, they want us to stop oil, you know, but at the same time, it's ramping up fossil fuels that will actually save the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the way that they want to do sustainable energy is just to keep it within a controlled paradigm that makes no sense, only
Mhm.
for the top people who can control everybody's energy usage. So, like,
Mhm.
I mean, if you want to go green, you look at nuclear too. I mean,
Yeah.
nuclear is like
That's
the
what I was gonna
best,
say for sure.
like clean nuclear. There's plenty of technology out there if we had the will to build it. Where,
Micronuclear.
oh yeah, backyard nukes. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, if it can't be weapon, I guess the fear tactics, you know, the fear campaign of it will be, you know, it's weaponizable. But actually, I'm pretty sure that micronuclear technology isn't weaponizable
Yeah.
as
I don't
people
think
think
so.
that it is. And also big nuclear, they use Fukushima and Chernobyl as examples to fear campaign against nuclear. But you know, we've had a lot of advancements since those issues. And also, like, Japan is on you know, it's an island that gets hit by tsunamis and like tectonic like activity. There's safer places with more like safety regulations and better technology now. And so they'll always cry Chernobyl and Fukushima in order to demonize, actually carbon neutral, for all intents and purposes, carbon neutral energy production for the entire world.
Yeah.
But if everybody had abundant cheap energy, how do you control them?
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a private company that came out with a nuclear home device, and they're going
Is
to
that
be
the egg?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I think it was a fraud.
It was?
No, it was a satire.
Yeah, the egg was, yeah.
Come on.
I was so excited. I think I probably sent it to you guys.
Wow.
But I guess it was a satire.
That sucks.
But you know what? It's kind of like Star Trek. Star Trek and sci-fi movies have actually inspired technology innovation. And so maybe a satirical egg video could actually inspire people to create such a thing.
I'm sure it could be done.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think it has been done, but like you were saying, how do you control from there?
How do you control people after they have abundant cheap energy?
I know how. It's a worldwide AI financial system.
Crypto. Well, but if you have the ability to, you could still do like what the Amish do, just with a backyard nuke, and just say, "Hey, we got the power to grow our own food and create it without cheap or borderline free energy." At that point, you can't. I mean, the crypto AI system has less power because it has an alternative. Whereas if you don't have that, there is no alternative.
Yeah.
Just don't put don't put a Wi-Fi router installed into the nuclear mini nuke.
It's a smart nuke.
Like these, they want to take, they like, you have like these cars that could be shut down. Like all the Teslas and almost all cars pretty much at this point can be just shut down. If the government really wanted to, they could do it. And they're trying to, the Dems push for shit like that. And it really baffles my mind how many people are okay with some of the crazy totalitarian 1984 type shit that the liberals want to do. And people are like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Like,
I got nothing to hide.
Yeah, I got nothing to hide. I actually don't use my stove that much anyway.
If the experts say it's good, I'll put my fridge on Wi-Fi, let it lock if I eat too much candy.
I also heard and saw that the smart meters on homes were like causing the fire to spread a lot in California.
Oh no, really?
For some reason, they're super flammable. Like there's one video of a tech actually went to a certain home and took the smart meter off before the flames got to it.
That's what you want on your house, right?
Connected to like the gas part or the
power
thermostat or
like
the
electrical
power.
Yeah, that's how they do the brownouts out there, is through all the smart meters.
Whoa,
I lived through that shit, dude. I lived through it. We had to buy a generator just to avoid it. They shut it off. I swear it's them, just like they tighten their grip until we push back a little bit, and then they loosen the grip a little bit, and then they tighten it more until we push back, and then they loosen it a little bit, and then they tighten it more until the fucking day where it's just like you almost have no freedoms left, and you have to inject your baby with 70 fucking unknown chemicals.
Yep. That was their plan the whole time.
Well, with that, I got to make some dinner, guys.
Wrap it up.
While I can still legally eat beef. I'm not no proud soy boy over here.
I do like oat milk. Am I canceled?
How dare you? Soyman. Oak man. Or oat, I should say.
Yes.
Well, Looks like we're on. Yeah, only time will tell when it comes to Trump's tariffs. I personally am a believer. I think he's going to win. The only real question is whether or not he's going to win the midterms. But like I said, time will tell. Time will also tell with those jabs. What 9 million miners injected with an unknown chemical. We're probably going to see the effects of that as well. And time will tell on whether or not the empire will officially fall. But with that, I bid you adieu.